It's Lloyd and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm doing a stream that I've been speaking about for some time on Aleister Crowley. So let me bring up the slides. Aleister Crowley is probably the 20th century's most famous Satanist, but no surprise, he had a deep and abiding interest in Islam. He found Christianity to be a slave religion, and of course he discovered that Muhammad represented something that he could really use in his desire to become a great Satanist. He found that Muhammad inspired him greatly and that Islam helped him greatly along his path to make, I don't know, the world a hell on earth. So we're going to have to talk about this because it's interesting how Islam pops up in the most interesting of places. Yes, the Crowley video finally happened. Welcome, Joel. You waited for so long. Thank you. Welcome. Yeah, and Sandro, I promised Fabian Society video tomorrow. So that's happening tomorrow. So let's continue. Now, as you can see from the photographs, Mr. Crowley is totally not crazy. Now, something to be noted is that for those who lean towards Satanism and give themselves up to Satan, eventually they always develop this kind of weird eye thing. One of their eyes always becomes distorted. It becomes disfigured. There's always some kind of oddity that occurs with one of their eyes. And they might develop other things like scars on the cheek and other kinds of disfigurements. So this seems to be the price you pay for giving your soul away. Hello, Janice. Welcome. So let's continue. The tale of two men. One of the two claims to have been contacted by an angel who selected him as the prophet of a new religion. The angel dictated a new revealed book and had focused on religious laws. As a hint, the other guy was Muhammad. Now, if you'd said Joseph Smith, you'd also be right, but this is not Joseph Smith's story, even though that's an entirely bizarre story involving magic as well. But Gabriel and Muhammad and the Qur'an, you know that story. Well, now we're going to talk a little bit about Aiwass, Crowley, and Thelema, which is the modern version of Islam, the modern Islam, a better Islam based on Islam. Now, Mr. Crowley identified Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, as a saint of Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica, which is the universal Gnostic Church, or the universal Catholic Church, right? No, so universal Gnostic Catholic Church. And Muhammad is also a magus of Argentium Astrum, or the Silver Star, which is Crowley's little magic society. And Crowley directly compared his own relationship to the, what he called the praeterhuman intelligence, the above human intelligence, the greater than human intelligence that spoke to him, this angel, Aiwass, with Muhammad's relationship to the angel gibberish. And Crowley writes, we occasionally hobnobbed with a General Dixon who had accepted Islam. I presume that after he accepted Islam, he changed his surname to Dickhead. And in his confessions, he offers these details regarding Cairo in early 1904. And this is Mr. J.B.B. Muhammad Dixon. Now, there's an interesting paper that I've covered in the past some time ago on Islamic conversions in America. And this goes back to the 1800s. And you'd be surprised by the people that have converted to Islam, let's say in France or America or the UK. And of course, amongst the Nazis, there were thousands of conversions to Islam. Thousands of Nazis, after World War II, they fled to the Middle Eastern countries, to North Africa, Egypt, and other countries to hide. Many of them changed their names, converted to Islam. Thousands of, something like 6,000 Nazis went to Egypt. One is to wonder how many of these peers and lords in the English government and, in English society are actually secretly or not so secretly Muslims. One has to wonder, what is their agenda? Where is their loyalty? And why is England turning into such an Islamic, into such an Islamic influenced society, to put it mildly and politely? Oh, thank you, MA552. Yep, so happy Saturday, everyone. Hello, Ave Maria, welcome. So let's continue. He says, as to my study of Islam, I got a sheikh to teach me Arabic and the practices of ablution, prayer, and so on. So at that some future time, I might pass for a Muslim among themselves. And I learned a number of chapters of the Qur'an by heart. Yep, so Mr. Crowley really applied himself to Islam. He says, my sheikh was profoundly versed in the mysticism and magic of Islam, and discovering that I was an initiate into Islam, in other words, a convert, had no hesitation in providing me with books and manuscripts on the Arabic Kabbalah. Now, of course, everyone goes on about the Jewish Kabbalah, but very few people talk about the Arabic Kabbalah. And these form the basis of my comparative studies. Now, I want to briefly do an aside and talk about Mr. Marilyn Manson, The Long Hard Road Out of Hell by Marilyn Manson with Neil Strauss. And he says here, what nearly everybody in my life had misunderstood about Satanism was that it is not about ritual sacrifices or digging up graves and worshiping the devil. The devil doesn't exist. Satanism is about worshiping yourself because you are responsible for your own good and evil. That is Gnostic. You making yourself the arbiter of good and evil. You are making yourself God. Of course, it says here the devil does not exist. Now, I believe Satan's greatest trick was to convince people that he doesn't exist. I would presume that this statement is false, that Satan does exist. Of course, notice the deformity in the eye here. Notice the oddity. You always find that. That seems to be a common mark of people who've really gone over to the dark side. And he goes on to say, Christianity's war against the devil has always been a fight against man's most natural instincts for sex, for violence, for self-gratification, and a denial of man's membership in the animal kingdom, while we are meant to rise above our base animal instincts and adhere to the better part of ourselves, to strive for something greater, be more like the angels and less like beasts. And he said the idea of heaven is just Christianity's way of creating a hell on earth. So we should really just give in to our animal selves, just go with the flow, ride with the tide, etc. So that's Marilyn Manson. So take that with a grain of salt. True, an initiate into magic, but the thing is, did you think you're going to say, hey, I do magic, and an imam's going to go, hey, welcome, come on in? No, you're going to have to be an initiate into Islam. Is it true that Queen Elizabeth came from Muslim lineage? No, but she did have a couple of Muslim advisors on her staff. That is a question that hasn't been asked often enough. And King Charles, is he a Muslim? That is no longer a freaky question. That is something that a lot of people are asking today. Debauchery, yes, Janice, that would be correct. Sure, it's contact lenses, and I bet he's perfectly normal otherwise, and I bet he was perfectly normal, and I bet all of those other Satanists, if you look at the Temple of Satan and so on, you can look at various of the members, and they all have these one cloudy eye, or they've got various disfigurements. So that certainly does happen, and I doubt it's all special effects. Now, the greater feast of Muhammad. Crowley claimed that his sheikh also taught him many of the secrets of Sidi Aisawa, a Sufi tariqa or initiatory system. So I doubt that the Muslims will teach you Muslimy stuff for poops and giggles. I'm sure they do it because they think that you are actually getting into Islam. Now, many of Crowley's examples of the yogic technique of mantra are in Arabic. So he learned Arabic, and his description of them sometimes relates strongly to the Sufi practice of dhikr, which is basically remembering Allah. And his AA program recommends to aspirants the study of Sufi poetry generally. Fine and well. Now, Crowley's annihilation, which is a translation of fana, which is a Sufi term for high mystical attainment, we'll talk more about this as we go, occurred during his work with the Enochian ethers in the desert of Algeria. As you know, Algeria is a famous Christian country, where he consecrated himself daily with 1,001 recitals of Surah Al-Ikhlas, because that's what That's what you do when you have no interest in Islam. You recite Surah Al-Ikhlas 1,000 times a day, which is the surah of pure faith from the Quran. It is well known that Crowley referred to the successor to his organizing authority as the Caliph. So the man who would take over was known as Crowley's Caliph, the Arabic title denoting the successor of Muhammad as the leader of the Muslim community. So obviously, as you can tell, this is nothing to do with Islam. Just like when Mr. Epstein on his island had, according to the Epstein files, a mosque on his island where he was given items from the Kaaba in Mecca. He was given a portion of the Kiswa cloth, which covers the Kaaba, and was given 2 items from inside the Kaaba by Muslims for his mosque on Little St. James Island. Nothing to do with Islam, obviously. So let's continue. Now, reading works that are beyond one's understanding or capacity. This is a chapter, a section from the Reliance of the Traveler, which is the most famous Islamic Sharia manual in English. You can see the Arabic on this side, and it speaks of the spiritual station of annihilation in Gnostic vision. So that's fana. This is when you annihilate the self and you merge with Allah. You commune with Allah. You become one with Allah. You effectively become like God. You become of one substance with God. You merge with God. Maybe you become God. So Crowley considers himself his immediate predecessor as Magus. Crowley considers Muhammad his immediate predecessor as Magus. And he says his true word was La Allah. That is to say, there is no God. Now, what is interesting is that La Allah, La is the Arabic word for no. And Allah, of course, that's the Islamic deity. And he said that, well, so he mixes this up and he goes, La Allah, meaning there is no God. Not there is no God but Allah, but there is no God. In other words, you are God. You become God. You achieve Godhood. So he established a warlike and rigid monotheism, which managed to conquer much of the world, today counting close to 700 million adherents. And Crowley writes this in his brief biographies of the Gnostic Saints. There's also longer ones. So Crowley writes about Muhammad in this fashion. Muhammad appears in all versions of the saints of the Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica. So Muhammad is one of the saints of the Universal Gnostic Church. And Muhammad is on the short list in all versions except for the first one, and is a name celebrated at all performances when the saints collect from those versions is read. So Muhammad is one of the saints of Crowley's church. Let's continue. So actually, I'll just bring this up. This is from the Hermetic Library. This is one of the sources you can consult. And they speak of Muhammad and so on and so on. So he's very important within that sphere, right? So there's plenty of sources you can go to learn about how Crowley revered Muhammad and Islam. So this is Magic Without Tears by Aleister Crowley. Yeah, Momo and Epstein have similar tastes, birds of a feather and all that. Exactly. Yeah, just a coincidence. So continuing. Originally to be titled Aleister Explains Everything, the letters in this book offer his insight into both magic and Thelema, which is his religious and quote-unquote ethical system of ethics. Aleister Crowley's admiration for Islam is no particular secret. In Magic Without Tears, he wrote, the most important of all the efforts of the White School. Now, the White School, obviously the good guys, I'm assuming here, from an exoteric or external point of view, is Islam. The most important of the efforts of the White School is Islam. In its doctrine, there's some slight taint, but it's much better than Christianity. There you go, guys, it's much better. It is a virile religion. It looks facts in the face and admits their horror, but it proposes to overcome them by sheer dint of manhood. Yeah, toxic masculinity to the max. I don't know why the leftists aren't freaking out. Unfortunately, the metaphysical conceptions of its quasi-profane schools are grossly materialistic. So he's got a little bit of criticism there. It is only the pantheism, we'll define that in a minute, of the Sufis which eliminates the conception of propitiation, characteristic of the Black School, and in practice the Sufis are too closely allied to the Vedantists to retain hold of reality. Now, the book, Magic Without Tears, is a collection of over 80 letters between Aleister Crowley and several other students. The recipient of the letters is given one name, Kara Soror. Now, pantheism is the philosophical and theological belief that God and the universe are identical, that God and nature are the same substance, equating the divine with the cosmos, the nature, and the totality of reality. So if nature is God and God is nature and you are part of nature, then you are God because you are of the same substance. So in other words, nature has achieved godhood and you are the highest of creation as man, and you can perfect yourself and therefore you can become God. And then the Vedantists, they believe that individual self, the Atman, is inherently divine. So you can be inherently divine and identical to ultimate reality, the Brahman, aiming for liberation, moksha, through knowledge and absolute unity. So the Vedantists believe that you can attain perfection, godhood, effectively through knowledge, the gnosis, and absolute unity. We know absolute unity as the Tawhid. Makes one wonder where else the Muslims got ideas for the Tawhid, for the absolute unity that defines God. So did they get the ideas for the Tawhid from these Vedantists? One has to wonder. Of course he was. Yeah, well, Crowley was really into Saint Momo. Exactly, Saint Muhammad. Patron saint for pedos, exactly. Saint Muhammad. Yep, exactly. Crowley was definitely into Saint Muhammad. Now, the word Thelema, that's the religion, and we're going to speak about a guy called Rabelais, right, who came up with the idea, do what you want, which is very, very relevant to discussions in Crowley. So Thelema is a Greek noun meaning will or desire, the thing that you want, inclination or even just pleasure. You know, if it makes you happy, do it, right? Which is something atheists will often speak about, that goodness is happiness. What makes you happy is good. So that's very utilitarian, but it's also very satanic. Now, Aleister Crowley's 20th century religion, Thelema, is directly named after and philosophically inspired by Francois Rabelais' fictional Abbey of Theleme from his 16th century work, Gargantua. So while Rabelais was supposedly writing a satirical Renaissance humanist critique and Crowley was establishing a modern occult system, the lineage of the do what thou wilt philosophy connects them. Now, there's a linguistic connection between what Rabelais wrote about in his supposed fiction, right, his satirical fiction, and Crowley. The word Theleme and the later, the Thelema, is derived from the Greek word which means the will or intent. Follow your will, follow your desire, do what makes you happy. And Rabelais used it to name his utopian abbey, where its inhabitants were governed by their own refined or perfected, because we're sophisticated people, right? And we can follow our will because we're so advanced, not like that rabble, you know, not like those working class English. No, we're better than that, you know. Or as Anna Kasparin would say, I'm better than you, right? So they have their own refined willpower rather than strict religious laws. No one needs to tell us we don't need religion because we've got superior intelligence. Crowley adopted the word to name his entire system centered on the discovery and execution of one's true will. There's a core commandment. The most famous parallel is the single rule that governs both systems. Do what you want. Do what thou wilt is the whole of the law. And there's a lot to unpack there. We'll get to that later. But it's, yeah, let's say Crowley might have left out a few details from the idea of do what you want. Most definitely. Very interesting. Follow your bliss. Yeah, let's just say it gets very dirty, very violent, very fast. It's not just anarchy, it's actual violence. It's clearly satanic. It's clearly dog eat dog. It's the law of the jungle. But we'll see more as we go, because it's actually defined very clearly later on. It sounds good in theory. Do what you want. you know, just do it. Good old Nike, but no, it's a lot worse than you'd realize. Correct, none of us are free from consequence, except that consequence could be from the person who's doing what he wants, you see. Saint Momo, yeah, 2 words that'll never make sense. But hey, look, someone has to tell Crowley that, okay? Let's continue. So Crowley in 1904 writes, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." Now, for Rabelais, this was a very optimistic view of human nature. Do what you want, because, you know, I'm assuming you've got moral, ethical code, and you're going to be a nice person, right? Right? No, you won't. He believed that well-born, well-educated people have an innate instinct or spur, which are called honor, that naturally leads them to virtuous actions when they are free from coercion. So, yeah, I just declare myself better than you, and thus I'm free to do this as I please. Crowley took this literary concept and he mysticized it. To Crowley, do what thou wilt didn't mean do whatever you feel like, but rather, now understand that sometimes when I'm quoting these things, I'm just quoting what is the common narrative. Doesn't mean I necessarily believe it, and I'll explain as I go. Now, the common, shall we say, apologetic about this is he doesn't mean do whatever you feel like, but rather discover your divine purpose, your true will, and follow it without distraction. That's not true. Not quite. Let's just say that the common narrative leaves out a few critical details, which changes that equation significantly. For instance, we can say that the Nazis were following their true will, their true purpose, and they were following it without distraction. That, you know, Mao and Stalin followed their true purpose, their true will without distraction. We can say that the Ayatollahs of Iran are following it, and eventually that always leads to mass murder. Now, in those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And that's in Judges 21, verse 25. And I think that is highly appropriate here. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And of course, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So, this guy created an anti-monastery concept. Now, this, of course, comes out of the Reformation, an anti-monastery idea. So Rabelais designed the Thelema as the perfect inversion of the medieval Catholic monastery. There were traditional monasteries. There were vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, strict schedules. There was gender segregation. But in the Abbey of Thelema, there was wealth, marriage, romance, affairs, and absolute freedom, no clocks, co-ed living. Crowley echoed this rejection of old world morality. Yeah, that's old school. Yeah, we don't do that kind of morality around here because we're superior people. You know, we can do what we please, and you know it's gonna be fine. So he viewed himself as a liberator from the slave religions. Yeah, when he says slave religions, he means Christianity. Okay. Mirroring Rabelais' humanist push against the rigid scholasticism of the Middle Ages. Let's see if I've missed any questions. The true will is aligned with God's will. It isn't easy. No, it's not. But these guys weren't aligning with God's will. They were aligning with, I would say, Satan's will. Yes, secret societies, Freemasonry and Islam. What's the connection? Well, the Muslims claim to have founded Freemasonry. The Muslim Brotherhood is the world's largest secret society, and they're a terrorist organization on top of it. So let's see. So guys, if you enjoy the content, if you enjoy what I do on the channel, please do like, obviously share it, do subscribe if you are not subscribed, and let people know about this. Obviously, YouTube heavily, shall we say, suppresses the channel, so suppresses the views. And yeah, it would be great if you can get this material out there so that we can grow the channel and get more of this out there. So let's continue, the Hellfire Club. Now let's learn a little bit about the Freemasons, according to the evidence that I've presented on the channel based on some very old historical recordings or writings, is that they were co-opted by the Sufis. So they became Muslims effectively, or they became corrupted by Sufi Muslim ideas. So no, the Muslims are the ones that gave the Sufi these ideas. And according to the Muslims, they infiltrated the Freemasons as their idea into England and Scotland, which were developments that come much later than Islamic Freemasonry. Islamic Freemasonry is the true and original and the most robust and complete variant, and the Freemasonry you find in the West is supposed to be a very pale offshoot of the original Islamic Freemasonry. I mean, the head of the Muslim Brotherhood was a Freemason, so think of it that way. Yeah, it gets pretty, it's pretty backwards and upside down. Okay, let's continue here. So let's talk about the Hellfire Club for a moment. The Hellfire Club. So Crowley was not the first to bridge this particular gap. In the 18th century, Sir Francis Dashwood founded what he called the Monks of Medmenham, popularly known as the Hellfire Club. This was their little club here, their monastery, as it were. So Dashwood took Rabelais' "Do What You Want" or "Do What Thou Wilt," and he carved it over the doorway of his abbey. So now Crowley was deeply aware of Dashwood's group, and he saw himself as a successor to this tradition of transgressive. Think transgenderism, transgressive, to transgress the law, to violate, transgender, violate gender, transgress. The sort of libertine, very sexually open philosophy rooted in Rabelais. Now, the Monks of Medmenham served as a historical bridge between Rabelais' literary fiction and Crowley's modern occultism. They had to call themselves the Hellfire Club, of course. By adopting the motto, "Do What You Want," I'm not going to try and pronounce the French at all, for their 18th century secret society, they transformed a Renaissance humanist ideal. Now, of course, the implication is in the standard narrative that the Renaissance and humanism are just awesome, and humanism is really just a step on the road to hell, because I've covered humanism and socialism and atheism, and humanism is as sick and dark as all the rest. But be that as it may, they obviously claim it was a great step forward. No. It was just really, just going backwards and giving into your most base instincts. But the Renaissance humanist ideal into a real-world practice of elitist hedonism and political subversion. In other words, they weren't real humanists. I'm sure we've heard that, or a variation of that, somewhere before. But they weren't real Renaissance humanists. No, they were, because that wasn't real socialism. Real socialism has never been tried. This was real Renaissance humanism. It has been tried, and that's exactly where it ended up. Try the French Revolution. That's exactly the same. That was real humanism right there. So they established a rebellious abbey tradition that Crowley later codified into a formal religious system. So while the DNA is the same, the intent differs. Rabelais was writing satire and promoting humanism. It's like, look, he was writing satire and promoting Satanism. We could say it that way, and it kind of wouldn't be that much different. He believed humans were naturally good. Sure, buddy. And that social religious structures were what corrupted them. So having order, having structure was what corrupted people. But if you just let people do what the heck they please, they're going to be like saints walking the earth. Sure. So there's the fact that Rabelais was writing a bunch of BS that was going to lead people astray and cause them to become corrupt and debased. And the standard narrative tries to paint that as well. You know, they weren't real humanists. It's just stupid. So the road to hell, as we know, is paved with good intentions. Or rather, the road to hell is paved with a lot of excuses and justifications for why you doing what you want is okay. So Crowley was writing magical doctrine. He believed that will was a metaphysical force that required intense ritual and spiritual discipline to master. Well, according to Islam, Masonry comes out of Islam. So yeah, it's just one of these tools they use to unseat the West. Yeah, the noble savage myth is real in a real sense. Yeah. Faiz, I don't know. Let me go back here. This was what Rabelais had here. Fay, you see here, F-A-Y. This is what was in his book, Gargantua. So I'm just using that. Remember, this is from 400 years ago. So maybe the French in 2026 spell it a little differently. But then again, Shakespeare also didn't spell like we do today. So In essence, Crowley took Rabelais' joke about a perfect playground and he turned it into a serious religious mandate for the modern age. So this is Medmenham Abbey. When the monks left, debauchery and the Hellfire Club moved in. Is anyone surprised? Debauchery. I mean, look, Islam is the home of debauchery, and yeah, the Hellfire Club moved in, and of course, debauchery took over. So when you go to the article, which is actually really interesting, I'll just bring this up for a moment. This is quite an interesting article. Yeah, the site you may not agree with, but there's some interesting details in the article. This was just a nice comprehensive article. It wasn't the only one I could find, but it was one article that just summarized a whole bunch of history. And of course, they would do things like invite prostitutes over and dress them up as nuns. And then the nuns would do things to please the monks, you know, and then have a little, I don't know, I guess they weren't very discreet about it, but shocking, you know, that they'd have these prostitutes dressed up as nuns doing things. Yeah, something like that happened in the French Revolution too, I believe. And yeah, who knows, right? Yeah, these people just aren't very original. They seem to keep repeating the same old, same old. So yeah, sexual debauchery and all sorts of, you know, drunkenness, licentiousness. Fascinating stuff. I thought they were going to be better than you, but it turns out they just want to shag around. So let's go on. The Gnostic Saints. So the Gnostic Saints are listed in Liber 15, also known as the Gnostic Mass, which is the central rite of the Ordo Templi Orientis, and its ecclesiastical arm, the Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica. So they're found in the 5th collect of Liber 15, titled The Saints. I'm not going to explain everything. It's not relevant necessarily. In the Catholic and Orthodox churches, a saint is a person who's been canonized, so that is officially recognized after his or her death. In the EGC, death is not necessarily a prerequisite for sainthood. Since Aleister Crowley was alive when he wrote Liber 15, he included himself twice. And the Gnostic Saints, so yeah, guys, just so by the way, I'm going to make myself a saint in my own religion. You can call me your Lord and Savior. Would that work? I mean, I'm just sort of testing an idea here. So yeah, I mean, I guess that if it, let me know if it works for you. Otherwise, I'll ditch the idea and just stick to the conventional. But the Gnostic Saints are generally considered to be those who have embodied the essential principles of Thelema and formed a line of adepts through the ages. So you can see Crowley was a very humble man. Definitely very humble, wouldn't mark himself down as a saint. The only Gnostic saint officially added to the original list is William Blake, based on a discovered writing by Crowley who described him as such. It's also considered appropriate to include the name of the deceased grandmasters of OTO, such as Hymenaeus Alpha, or whatever. From Liber 15, the entire collect is written below. The names in italics are commemorated in ordinary masses, whereas the entire list is intended for a celebratory mass, such as when it is performed in conjunction with a wedding. So at certain masses, like on Sunday or whenever they do their masses, they'll read out the names of the saints. I actually read this stuff, and yeah, whatever, it's pretty arbitrary and bizarre, but yeah, they'll just read out the whole long list of the saints of their particular church, including Muhammad. Not Jesus, though. Unfortunately, Jesus didn't make the cut. O sons of the lion and snake. Yeah, the snake. I guess that has a special place in the Bible, but okay. With all thy saints, we worthily commemorate them, worthy that were and are to come. May their essence be here, present, potent, puissant, and paternal to perfect this feast. Great. Sounds like ancestor worship, but let's move on. I'm from Africa. Yep. Has a channel. I'm black, so you have to, it's racist to disagree. So you kind of, I'm a saint. Yeah, not in Poland. Oh, darn it. I got to move out of Poland. Hail Saint de Jong. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Saint Lloyd. Just, yeah, exactly. So Islam's idea of heaven is essentially booze and whores. Yes, exactly. Yeah, a whole river of booze and a bunch of whores. So yeah. Which is exactly what the Hellfire Club was doing, booze and whores. It was Islam without the swords, I guess. Saint Lloyd, put in a good word for me. I will. Yep, that William Blake. That William Blake. So, yeah, to see the world in a grain of sand, infinity in an hour. Yeah. Okay, so collect 5, the saints. Muhammad is the 7th Gnostic saint. Lord of life and joy, that art the might of man, that art the essence of every true God that is upon the surface of the earth. Continuing knowledge from generation unto generation, thou adored of us upon heaths and in woods, on mountains and in caves, openly in the marketplaces, and secretly in the chambers of our houses, in temples of gold and ivory and marble, as in these other temples of our bodies. We worthily commemorate them, worthy that did of old adore thee and manifest thy glory unto men. So just so, by the way, Lao Tzu makes the list. Siddhartha, Krishna, Tahuti, Dionysus. Was he even real? Heck, I don't think so. Muhammad, Tel Megatherion. Okay, thanks. That's great to know. Simon Magus. I believe he was a bad guy in the Bible. Check the New Testament. Simon Magus may not be a good guy, but he makes the list. Manes, so that's the head of the Manichaean religion, the Gnostic Manichaean religion. Basilides, yeah, Valentinus. These are all very big Gnostics. Christian Rosenkreuz. So Christian Rosenkreuz, Christian, of course, like Christian. Yeah, I'm a Christian. And Rosenkreuz, red cross, the rosy cross. That would be, ever heard of the Rosicrucians? So a guy goes from Austria, I think it was, and he heads off to North Africa, to Morocco. And there he finds the secrets of the universe from a Sufi, and he brings back Rosicrucianism. Isn't that just fascinating? Didn't get it from a Jew in Jerusalem. He certainly got it from a Muslim in Morocco. Interesting. His name is Christian Rosy Cross, for sure. Ulrich von Hutten, Paracelsus, Michael Myers. I guess this is from Friday the 13th. I'm not sure, but could be. And then you have Sir Richard Francis Burton. Muslim. And then, of course, we have Sir Aleister Crowley. Oh, so he makes himself into... And, of course, Merlin and Arthur. Yeah, them too. They pray to them. So they pray to these guys. Crazy stuff. So, yeah, these are the people. If you really want to join this religion, you can pray to these guys too. So, moving on. The cake of light. Now, yeah. Hello, Sylvia. Welcome. Welcome, centuries since. Jesus was of color. Muhammad is white with a ginger beard and pubes. Yeah, disgusting. Don't even want to think about it. Hermes Trismegister didn't make the cut. I don't know. He may have. Gerald says, did you make a video about the eschatology comparison with Christianity? I've been led to believe they are parallel but opposite. They are vastly different. They're vastly different. Okay, let's continue. So, Aleister Crowley then lights the cake of light is, if I recall, it's a food that you make from your own urine. Okay, just so by the way, Muhammad said just drink the urine raw, but Crowley was like, yeah, make food out of it. Just use it as an ingredient. But let's move on. Aleister Crowley wrote the Gnostic Mass, technically called Liber 15 or Book 15, in 1913 while traveling in Moscow. In many ways, it is similar to the structure of the Mass of the Roman Catholic Church. However, the Gnostic Mass is a celebration of the principles of Thelema, and the ceremony calls for 5 officers, a priest, a priestess, a deacon, and 2 acolytes called children. The end of the ritual culminates in the consummation of the Eucharist, which is a glass of wine and a host called the cake of light, after which the congregant proclaims, there is no part of me that is not of the gods. Yeah, that's kind of like, I'm a god too. I'm infused with the godhood of the gods. Yeah, I guess very humble people, very humble. I resolved, as Crowley said, that my ritual should celebrate the sublimity of the operation of universal forces without introducing disputable metaphysical theories. I would neither make nor imply any statement about nature which would not be endorsed by the most materialistic man of science. So in other words, we had the Crowleyan sciences, because his religion was backed by science. We'll learn a little bit more about it, but it's like Islamic science, like the science of Hadith and the sciences of Islam, and yeah, it's nothing to do with Islam at all. Now, the cake of light recipe is in the Book of Law, by the way. Let me see. Okay, so maybe it doesn't have actually... Okay, the website is down, oddly enough. Interesting. Okay, so maybe it doesn't have urine in it. Maybe there's something else that has urine in it. For perfume, mix meal and honey and thick leavings of red wine and oil of abramelin and olive oil, and afterwards soften and smooth down with rich, fresh blood. The best blood is of the moon, monthly, then the fresh blood of a child. So if your girlfriend is having her periods, ask if she can help you out a little bit because you got to make the cake. Or dropping from the host of heaven, then of enemies. What is the dropping from the host of heaven? Like, is that like angel poop or something? Did I miss? Okay, then of enemies, then of the priest or of the worshippers, last of some beast, no matter what. Droppings. Droppings, animal droppings. We all know what those are. Droppings from blood dropping from the host of heaven, then blood dropping from your enemies, then of the priest or of the worshippers, and then some beast, no matter what. So human blood preferred. Okay. This burn, of this make cakes and eat unto me. This hath also another use, that it be laid before me and kept thick with perfumes of your orison. Orison meaning prayer or plea to a deity. It shall become full of beetles, as it were, and creeping things, sacred unto me. Yeah, that just reminds me of that movie. Hold on. You know, this reminds me of that movie Constantine, of the insect demon. You know, that really just reminds me of that insect demon in Constantine, like the thing that made up full of insects. Yeah, so this thing is holy because it becomes full of beetles and creeping things, crawling things like worms, sacred unto me. Because yeah, no wonder Jesus wasn't invited to this particular party, because the food, yeah, I don't want to be, if that's what they eat, they can keep it. Begins with A, so yeah, I think they mean the word, and eating those who speak the word, the form. Bird poop, fuck, I have no idea, but I didn't want to look into it because this just grossed me out just reading that bit, to be honest. The cake, yeah, you defile God's temple. So let me see if I've missed anything. Yeah, the camel urine in Islam. Yeah, interesting. They don't mock the Protestant idea of communion. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Hermes was on the list. He's right. Yeah, actually, he's right. Yeah, Hermes was on the list. So Hermes Trismegistus did make the cut. Just hearing this is disgusting. Imagine eating it. Oh my God. Yeah, Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies. Exactly. It's the bird is the yummy. Yeah, disgusting. Okay, so yeah, I think we're off to a great start here. So we're off to a fantastic start. So now, David McGowan. Now, I actually used to listen to David McGowan when he was alive, and I bought his book, Program to Kill. I've read all of his articles. There's a lot of things that he wrote that are just incredible research for the day. And I mean, one might not agree with all of his conclusions, but the guy certainly wrote some brilliant stuff. And Program to Kill was very interesting. So, New York City, 1875. Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky founded the Theosophical Society, an occult group that survives to this day. I'm just going to zoom in here. Sorry. This is David McGowan showing you here. This is about Program to Kill, the politics of serial murder in Programmed to Kill. And he writes about this, and he writes about, I mean, whether you agree with these conclusions or not, that a lot of serial killers, obviously the Satanism, there's all sorts of satanic overtones and undertones and so on. But many of them are connected to secret societies, of course, but also to groups like the CIA, which, yeah, anyway, take that as you will. But let's just say the guy has some very compelling research that he has done. New York City, 1875. Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky founds the Theosophical Society, an occult group that survives to this day. And it supplied much of the ideology of Hitler's Third Reich. Over the course of the next decade and a half, Blavatsky published ISIS Unveiled and The Secret Doctrine, literary works that have proven to be hugely influential with many succeeding generations of modern Satanists and white supremacists. And I mean real ones, not like people that just want their kids to grow up straight, not those white supremacists. Just, I mean, the genuine sort of KKK style. But then, of course, the KKK, they had the holy book, which is called the Qur'an, and they had caliphs and jinns and lots of Muslim things going on there. So the KKK is kind of Muslim-y, far too Muslim-y for comfort. As author Peter Levender has written, Blavatsky popularized the notion of a spiritual struggle between races and of the inherent superiority of the Aryan race, hypothetically, the latest in line of spiritual evolution. So this belief in Aryan supremacy was echoed by philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who during the same time frame posited the existence of an Aryan Superman, the perfected man, and he advocated racial genocide. And Nietzsche's work was also liberally borrowed from by the architects of Nazi Germany. Yeah, so these theosophists, they really, really helped a lot of very dark, very ugly ideas, political movements get off the ground. And everyone's going to go, yeah, but that wasn't real theosophy. Great. And I guess Osama bin Laden was not a real Muslim, etc., etc. We've all heard that before. One of Blavatsky's most devout followers and was instrumental in introducing to Western Europe the infamous Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And this document, known to be a forgery, which more or less accurately identified the existence of an ultra-secret cabal bent on global domination and the subjugation of the world's people, identified this game plan as a grand Jewish conspiracy, thereby fueling the rabid anti-Semitism that served to stabilize the fascist states of Europe. We have an enemy now, let's go and attack those guys. So now, magic in theory and practice by Master Therion, also known as Aleister Crowley, right? This is 1929. Blavatsky also, so this is from David McGowan's Programmed to Kill, right? Where, as I said, he writes about these serial killers that all seem to have common links. They all seem to come out of a certain ideology. They seem to be linked to certain groups. They seem to have certain common ideas, things that once you dig into the background, it's like, yeah, well, he wrote that Blavatsky also wrote of the importance of ancient alphabets, particularly what is referred to as runes. Many of these runes would later show up prominently in the symbolism of the Nazi Party, including the SS lightning bolts and the swastika, which had been identified by Blavatsky as having supreme occult significance. So with the founding of the Theosophical, you bought a copy of the Qur'an? Interesting. Yeah, the Waldorf school, I know. It's crazy that the Waldorf school is based on a guy who was deep into sort of occultic Gnostic stuff. I mean, one has to wonder just what kind of minds it's turning out, how it's influencing people potentially negatively. Maybe you should wonder why Hitler, for instance, loved himself some Nietzsche. You know, I mean, Muslims will tell you Muhammad never said anything like that. The Quran doesn't say anything like that. I mean, you know, you could give them a signed affidavit by Muhammad and they wouldn't believe it. Okay, let me think. Okay, so with the founding of the Theosophical Society in 1875, Blavatsky was essentially being passed the torch by Abbe Alphonse Louis Constant, who died that same year, better known in occult circles as Eliphas Levi. So Eliphas Levi, Eliphas Levi is the guy that gave you this image. So Eliphas Levi is the guy that gave you the modern image of the Baphomet. You know, in most of these drawings here, you've got, you get the idea here. Let me just bring this into a new tab. You can see this is the transgender El Diable, Le Diable, the devil. So you can see here with the boobies and the winky. So that's a technical term you use on YouTube. So you can see here, as above, so below, and all sorts of, you know, the one arm up, one arm down. He's got the winky and he's got the boobies. So you've got the transgenderism going, and that's the devil. Yeah, so you get the idea. That's Eliphas Levi, and that's the whole transgender thing going for us there. So Eliphas Levi gave us the modern depiction of the Baphomet. He was a French magician and author and former priest who wrote a series of highly influential books from 1855 to 1865, Dogma and the Ritual of High Magic, The History of Magic, and the Key of the Great Mysteries. One of Levi's disciples was General Albert Pike, Chief of Intelligence for the Confederate Army and the highest-ranking Freemason in North America. Fascinating. All of this has a point. We're going somewhere. In 1867, Pike incorporated Levi's ideas into the Constitution that he drafted for an overtly racist, occult-based secret society that he and an alliance of Confederate generals and intelligence operatives created following the American Civil War, the Ku Klux Klan. I've spoken about them before on the channel. They have a holy book called the Qur'an, which vaguely, it doesn't sound like the Bible. It sounds more like the Qur'an, because that's why they called it the Qur'an. They have the Caliph, they have genies, they've got all sorts of, a whole bunch of Muslim terms associated with this because it's all modeled on Islam. Right, so these guys go and make the Ku Klux Klan. Levi's ideas would later find favors with the occult practitioners who engineered the rise of Nazi Germany. And of course, the Thule Society was created by a Muslim convert, a Muslim Sufi, who then got all of these Nazis to come and join the party. And then what happened was a year later, they convert this particular secret society, this occult society, into the Nazi party. But yeah, we've spoken about that before. The Nazi party literally comes out of a group built by a Muslim. 1875 was the year that a certain Edward Alexander Crowley was born. Edward, better known as Aleister, by the grandiose label that he chose for himself, the Great Beast 666, was without question the most influential occultist of the 20th century. So remember, in the book Program to Kill, you can read this content in that book if you want to get a copy of the book Program to Kill by David McGowan. Right? He was also an asset of British military intelligence, just as Albert Pike was an American intelligence operative, just as Karl Kellner, Franz Hartmann, and Theodor Reuss had close ties to German intelligence entities. Hartmann, Reuss, and Kellner were the primary architects of the Ordo Templi Orientis, the OTO, a secret society formed in Germany around 1895 that claims to be in a direct line of descent from the Knights Templar, which some researchers believe to be the granddaddy of all the occult-based secret Masonic societies. And of course, I've covered in the past, I won't do it now, but we can do it again in the future, that they were tempted by Sufi mysteries. So whether or not there's any factual basis for that belief remains an open question, one that is beyond the scope of this book. What is known is that the OTO was directly linked to Blavatsky through Hartmann and Theosophist and close associates of the Madame, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. The reason they call it the Golden Dawn, it's the Hermetic Order. That's from Hermes Trismegistus, right? The knowledge of this whole Hermes, the god that brought, the moon god that brought all sorts of blah, 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 the Hikmah. Basically, the Golden Dawn is because your urine is very, very important. And when you wake up in the morning, the Golden Dawn is you wake up to the golden wee-wee, and you've got to preserve the golden wee-wee for various magical reasons. The Golden Dawn, golden wee-wee. It's like golden showers. You get the point. We're all adults here. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, founded by Theosophist William Westcott in 1888, and was closely allied with Blavatsky's group as well. It was the Order of the Golden Dawn, which he joined in 1898, that Aleister Crowley first attained occult celebrity status. He then created his own occult order, which he named the Astrum Argentium, or the Silver Star, and in 1907 began publishing its newsletter, the Equinox, a couple of years later. In 1912, Crowley then forges a close association with Theodor Reuss, who introduced him to the OTO, and he appointed Crowley to head the order's UK chapter. So that same year, Crowley penned an OTO manifesto that included a list of those who claimed to be past Grand Masters of the Lodge. On that list were composer Richard Wagner, the March of the Valkyries, you might know him, and an associate of his, Friedrich Nietzsche, whose published works included The Antichrist. Now, for the Nietzsche fans, I mean, clearly Nietzsche never said that, not my Nietzsche. Sure, whatever. In 1919, Crowley declared that every non-member of the occult order should be treated as a savage. So you're a kafir savage. There you go. So yeah, this is definitely about love, about loving thy neighbor. About, are you not a member of the? So you're a savage. Just so you know, you savages. Sadly, that makes me a savage too, because I don't want to drink cakes made out of menstrual blood and yeah, and beetles. It's disgusting. I mean, seriously, I grew up in Africa. I got my dollar a day. I was able to eat real food, and I kind of got away from the bad food that, now I drink bottled water, which is great. Thank you, Western world. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys a lot. And I can go to McDonald's if I really, really want, and I can get a burger, and I can get pizza, and I can get really nice food. So yeah, I think I'll stay away from the menstrual blood burgers. Not for me. So he declares that every non-member of the occult order should be treated as a savage. Around the same time, he became known for his published works of pro-German, oh my God, and pro-Nazi propaganda, which he continued to produce through both world wars. Yeah, okay, fine. So the guy was liked himself some Nazism. Okay. While living in the US, Crowley wrote for two pro-fascist rags, the Fatherland and the Internationalist. Around 1920, Crowley moved to Sicily, where he founded the Thelema Abbey, a site that quickly became known for conducting satanic rites, complete with animal sacrifices, bestiality, and blood drinking. Yeah, that's not good. Actually, there was something I wanted to show you guys. Let me find it. I'll just look for it quickly. If I can find it. Let me see if I can find this within a reasonable time. Okay, so okay, but yeah, of course it's going to take forever to come up. So just so by the way, on the whole bestiality front, so Afghan teen faces trial for raping goats and sheep in France. Now, if you see the picture, it's not here now, but there was a little paddock that was made where these animals were tied up, and apparently these were pretty rough sexual assaults of these animals, and they were left injured. Okay, so I don't know. Maybe this is how you do Afghani engineering, or maybe that's how you become an Afghani doctor. I have no idea why a doctor, an aspiring lawyer, one of these doctors, lawyers, and engineers would need to. But okay, maybe if you guys need to import engineers of this type into France, he was probably doing some engineering experiment. Who knows? But bestiality. So seems to be a connection here, because as long as you don't eat bacon, you're good. Bacon's haram. Shagging the sheep, you're good to go. Several locations. Let's just say it's pretty gross. But yeah, bestiality. It was an Afghan leisure center. Yeah, disgusting. Yeah, there are videos. There are plenty of videos of Crowley's location. It's still in Sicily, and it's been blocked off. People aren't supposed to go there. But yeah, a cat was assaulted in Rome. I mean, there were chickens being assaulted by a guy, and his wife filmed it, and they put it on social media. Like, what the hell? Yeah, 11% insects per Ursula von der Leyen decree allowed in EU food as. Yeah, this is all disgusting. I mean, clearly these people are. Yeah, tomorrow when I talk about the Fabian Society, you're going to learn their founders had the most disgusting ideas. And there's a reason that George Orwell wrote 1984. He was writing about the members of the Fabian Society and their plans for the government. I've seen the Black Madonna many times. There's a very famous one in Częstochowa, and I've been there several times. It's actually beautiful. It's a beautiful sight. The whole place is really stunning. I've been there a few times. Okay, kurz praten. We can let this go, Billy Bogus. I think we can stop now. Whatever you guys are on about, it stops here and now. Okay, so let's just continue. So in Sicily, he founds the Thelema Abbey, which became known for its animal sacrifices, bestiality, and blood drinking. David McGowan goes on, the Abbey also gained notoriety for being fraught with death and disease. Crowley's own infant child died there. Now, Marx, Mr. Karl Marx, of course we know why he's famous. He had 2 of his babies mysteriously die, just sheer coincidence, of course. Nothing to do with Satanism, child sacrifice, or anything like that, I no doubt. But he wrote poetry to Satan. He wrote plays to Satan. He had his daughters have death pacts with their husbands that they would murder themselves. And he starved his children to death. So yeah, and he didn't wash. He developed sores all over his body. He stank. He didn't clean himself. But yeah, clearly nothing to do with Satanism at all. So definitely not a sacrifice. No, 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 no. Crowley's own infant child died there, as did others. At the time, Crowley was openly accused of infanticide, and he never denied the charges. To the contrary, Crowley openly and rather flamboyantly reveled in his depravity. In his Diary of a Dope Fiend, other books, you'll see other versions called In Diary of a Drug Fiend, Crowley was a lifelong drug abuser, right? Drugs of all types. He was definitely hard into his drugs. He wrote that I've driven myself to delight in dirty and disgusting debauches and to devour human excrement and human flesh. So he went from drinking blood to drinking human blood to human flesh and human excrement. Now, of course, there's another very famous, shall we say, theologian who is also historically recorded to have also devoured human poop for medicinal reasons. His name is Martin Luther. You guys will know him as the father of the Reformation and the father of the Lutheran Church, who also apparently liked himself some human poop. He would eat a little bit of his poop every day for health reasons, but nothing to do with Satanism at all. No, sorry. Reformation was a good thing. The reformers were the best theologians ever. Sure. Aleister Crowley. Yes, that does remind me of a certain German and his obsession. Yes, yes. That particular German who also believed that the mentally ill should be murdered. Greatest theologian ever. Reformation was all about doing good for the world. Sure. That's why I can't get any of these. That's why I can't get any of these Protestants to actually come on the channel and talk about the founding history of their movements and come talk about Martin Luther openly. I couldn't get any Baptists. I mean, I approached dozens, literally dozens. I made public statements. I made posts on numerous dozens and dozens of social media accounts. I invited people to come and answer questions, talk about the founding history, and talk about Martin Luther and the founders like the Baptists, the Lutherans, and so on. I invited them, and they refused to. All of them refused to. Not a single one. And I mean, I approached directly maybe 60 or so. And of course, I made public posts, multiple public posts on various social media sites, including my own. And I invited, in theory, hundreds of people to come and have that discussion with me, and they don't want to. I can't understand why you'd be ashamed and afraid of talking about the founding history of your Reformation Protestant group. I just find it very strange why you wouldn't want to dig into the history of the founding of your group and Martin Luther and, you know, see if the official narrative is maybe just a bunch of bullshit. So Aleister Crowley was a noted mountain climber, Satanist, and writer during the 1920s, recounts his cocaine experiences in a book titled Diary of a Dope Fiend or Diary of a Drug Fiend. One sniff gives a sensation of the most exquisitely delicious wickedness. And he says here, I had never been particularly keen on women. So yeah, I'm sure you can fill in the blanks. Let's just say homie swang both ways. But with cocaine, things are absolutely different. One becomes positively reckless. And as for the great beast, Do read his novel, Diary of a Drug Fiend. The last quarter of it is absolute garbage. A sort of puff piece for Crowley and a denial of his addiction. But the first part is quite a good read. We'll cover more of this as we go through. Also, Crowley was a very handsome fellow in his youth. He was quite good looking. Years of drug abuse and dissipation produced the Pillsbury Doughboy looking geek you see in the photos. He died old, alone, despised, and dope sick, and poor. Yeah. Right? In a cheap rooming house, begging for heroin and as poor as a shithouse rat. Considering he began life as a wealthy young man, he owned a prosperous brewery, and the ungrateful bugger hated God, and he died a near pauper. So, do you now see the power of the occult forces? So, let me see. Have I missed anything? The death of a young follower is just a coincidence. Yeah, it's all just coincidences. There was a lot wrong with the Catholic Church at the time. You know, personally, from having read a lot of the history, there was a lot less wrong with the Catholic Church than is generally asserted. Because I can tell you now, if a church founded by a guy who quite literally got his major revelations while taking a shit in the toilet, who spent the majority of his time screaming at Satan in the toilet and eating his own shit every day, if the Reformation is based on that guy, I think I'd go for the Pope over that shit any day. And then if the guy also decided that we needed to murder the disabled because they were created by Satan and didn't have a soul anyway, and Protestants don't want to talk about that, don't want to talk about the ugly, disgusting history, like how Martin Luther was writing letters to his wife saying how prostitutes aren't helping him to get it up anymore, you know, because seeing naked prostitutes isn't getting him hard. Maybe we want to start looking at some of that history and saying, hey, Protestants, why do you want to talk about this? Because Martin Luther himself stated his problem with the Catholic Church was not tithes. That was just a pretext that everyone uses. He used it and everyone else jumps on it. But you don't want to get rid of about a dozen books from the Bible because of a financial issue, because someone's taking money from the kitty. If someone's taking money from the kitty, then you lock the freaking kitty. You don't say, hey, you know what we got to do is take 12 books out of the Bible. So Martin Luther had a totally different agenda. And in fact, he writes in his own words that the problem he had was that the church believed in free will, and Martin Luther disagreed with free will. And free will was, you don't have it. You see? So yeah, once you read actual Martin Luther, rather than the lies, the copious lies that Protestants tell about Martin Luther, rather than what Martin Luther himself says, then you start to find that maybe most of what was written about the Catholic Church is lies. Not to say there weren't problems, but here's another thing. Let's say you take a company like Coca-Cola. Okay, let's say that the company, the CEO is corrupt. Well, you throw him in jail, you get a new one, right? It's still a company. But you don't come along, open another company called Coca-Cola and claim that you now are the real Coca-Cola, because you're not. That's an existing institution. You're just a copycat that's asserting that you are the thing. You're not. You're just a Johnny-come-lately who's giving yourself all sorts of different airs. And then, of course, every other copycat that comes from you is totally different, contradictory, has completely different doctrine, none of which is justified, none of which can be defended. And literally every single Protestant group on earth in history has claimed lineage through Gnostic groups, through known heresies, through complete anti-Christian groups as their foundation and their lineage to the apostles, which is complete garbage. There's not a single Protestant group that didn't make this claim between the 16 and 1800s. And now they all want to deny it. They want to talk about it because it's too embarrassing. Protestantism is based quite literally on a guy who ate his own shit and had revelations while taking a shit. So I'd say there's a small problem with that. We need to start looking at that, because Protestants claim that they are high and mighty, walk on water, squeaky clean, pure as the driven snow, because Catholics bad. Well, okay, we've looked at the Catholics bad thing, fine and well, that's been done. Now let's look at the Protestants good. And you're going to find that Protestants are dirty as fuck, I think is a pretty good way to describe the history as I've covered on the channel. They also collaborated heavily with the Muslims. If you start to look at Martin Luther's praise for Muslims, the Muslims were even more pious than Jesus, right? and the way that they collaborated with the Muslims to actually help them invade Europe. So you start looking at those histories, and maybe the Protestants don't look so squeaky clean anymore. So Protestants, just like Muslims, constantly attack the other side because they don't want to look at their own side and look at and see that maybe the people that they revere so much are just liars and they're lying. So let's pause there for a moment. And I think that, I've covered a lot of this on the channel. I've gone through this and it's upset a lot of people. But again, I've invited hundreds of people to come openly have that discussion, look at the facts, go through the history, rather Muslim than a papist, rather Turk than papist, right? Would rather be a Muslim than be a Catholic. Well, that was the English, that was the Dutch, and so on and so on and so on. So, moving on. Yeah, Reformed Protestants love to throw their spiritual ancestors under the bus with no trouble whatsoever. They're very much like Muslims, JWs, exactly. Yeah, so Luther just happened to be the first to survive. No, Luther was an absolute liar. And most of these claims about the Catholic Church was the Protestants murdered a lot more witches than the Catholic Church ever did. I mean, when I do the series on the Inquisition, 99%, the way that story is told, it's 99% lies. Because Martin Luther was a liar, an incredibly good one, extremely good propagandist, major liar. Protestantism is based on historical lies. It's as simple as that. It's completely irrational. But I've covered this at length on the channel. As I said, I've invited tons of people. And I've spoken with various people in the background. And I've invited others, and they don't want to come and talk to me. Because I don't think they want to hear the facts. They don't want to see the truth. Because they've got a narrative. Like Muslims, they've got a bullshit narrative that they like. And they don't want the truth to get in the way of their lie. Yeah, something like that. Something like that, Eva. Okay, let me see. Have I missed anything here? So let me see. Okay, so yeah, there we go. I understand what I say here is not very popular because many of the things I say go against the grain. We're all supposed to just play the game and go along with the lie, but yeah, I'm not interested. Okay, so as for the Great Beast, read his novel, Diary of a Drug Fiend. The last part is garbage, a puff piece for Crowley in denial of his addiction. But the first part is a good read. Crowley was a handsome fellow, right? And he died a near pauper because of the occult. And here you see, this is Crowley near his end. You can see the guy was losing his little mind, right? And here he was playing a Chinese god. This is like a sort of a Chinese, he was trying to imitate like a Chinese god in this one. This is Diary of a Drug Fiend, the Diary of a Drug Fiend by Aleister Crowley. And this is him here losing his hair and starting to look very gaunt and wasted. And dubbed the wickedest man in the world by the popular press and self-styled the Great Beast 666. Aleister Crowley was an English occultist, a drug addict, and an alcoholic. Oh, sounds like a great guy. Secret agent, explorer, bankrupt, poet, painter, magician, and mountaineer, as well as the inventor of the religion of Thelema. He also had a genius for causing scandal wherever he went. The collection of his work consists of 2 novels, Diary of a Drug Fiend and Moonchild, the Book of Lies. Oh, the Book of Lies and the Book of the Law. Both are cryptic expositions of Crowley's esoteric philosophy. At the play, The Household Gods, and some of his early poems from White Stains. What kind of white stains could he be talking about? What white stains would this lecherous, debauched man be talking about? It's a unique insight into the occult, the arcane, the terrifying highs and lows of drug addiction. And these texts are not for the faint of heart. And back to Crowley, He was a great propagandist as the printing press took off. The Catholics killed 150 million in one night using machine guns. So, yeah. So let's go on. Let me continue. Like Momo's stained clothes, he was always proud of. Yeah, that Aisha had to. Yeah, Aisha knows those stains exactly. So let's go on. Okay, so Snow's Up the Nose, a history of cocaine. So now we know that Crowley was a drug addict. I don't know who's an example, who's going to take him as an example, because It's like Muhammad. It's like the worst examples under the sun, but somehow these guys are like, yeah, whatever. So, for instance, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but they speak here of this guy. You would know him as Sick Man Fraud. Sick Man Fraud was the guy who created psychotherapy, whatever, psychoanalysis, psychology. Sick Man Fraud, this guy, right? Then, of course, this guy, mustache guy, he was into his drugs as well. And, of course, Mr. Crowley here. Cocaine can complement a life which is already sustaining, or it can lead to mindless megalomania where the steady user becomes so intoxicated with his or her charisma that the rest of the world simply evaporates. See, so if you are intelligent, if you use your own intellect well and you are disciplined, you can use all of these things like cocaine and you will perfect yourself and become greater than all the other humans. It's the real thing. Cocaine has enjoyed a popularity befitting its power ever since it was introduced to Europe. Robert Louis Stevenson is believed to have conceived of and written his classic Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde when he switched from morphine to cocaine, it says here. His use of cocaine probably accounts for the demonical pace at which the bedridden Stevenson wrote and then completely rewrote the 60,000-word novel in 6 days. So Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, also indulged in the drug, and he passed the practice along to the famous sleuth. Fascinating. In order to fight boredom and keep his legendary brain in top shape between capers, Sherlock Holmes injected a 7% solution of Nambolia compound. Yeah, Dr. Watson, Hitler, and several of his satanic cronies also blew coke. Just so you know. Aleister Crowley was a noted mountain climber, Satanist, and writer during the 1920s, and he recounts his cocaine experiences in a book entitled Diary of a Dope Fiend. Right, already mentioned that. And then furthermore, as the colonialists forced the Inca slaves to mine silver at altitudes of over 17,000 feet, they soon found that their workforce could not physically survive without coca. So yeah, just so you know that this is an interesting article about cocaine, and it's written as Coca-Cola because that used to be an ingredient of Coca-Cola or a side product, a byproduct of making Coca-Cola. All right, now I'll go another 10 minutes or so because I'll continue this like once per week. So that is true. If cocaine was available back then, yeah. Yep, that's Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was on drugs a lot of the time. He had headaches, he had issues, but there was reasons for that. For instance, if you go to the Wolf's Lair in Poland, where he lives, the Wolfschanze, this was pressurized inside. It was slightly high pressure, which is to give him headaches, because the whole bunker was massive. And it was pressurized so that if any gas were used, the gas would not come in because the pressure inside was much higher and the airflow was only outwards. So therefore, it was safe for him to be there. And he spent significant part of the war in Poland at his in the Wolf's Lair in the Mazura region or the Lakes region of Poland. And that's where he was when the bomb was Operation Valkyrie. Where he was nearly killed, but the bomb unfortunately just broke his arm or something. So yeah, I've been there. It's actually a brilliant tour to do. And yeah, he was on drugs all the time for painkillers and all sorts of things. Right, so let's talk about the Plymouth Brethren. Let's go to England. Yeah, opium was available, yeah. So mountain climber Satanist. It's type 2 casually, yeah. So originating in Dublin in the 1820s, they were a nonconformist evangelical Christian movement emphasizing sola scriptura, Bible as sole authority, and rejection of formal clergy, believing all members could minister. Everyone's a priest. Everyone gets a theota. Strict, puritanical, and marked by daily worship and apocalyptic expectations, just like Muhammad, oddly enough. Likely fueled Crowley's rebellion against rigid Christian dogma and attraction to Islam's perceived freedom and mysticism. The Brethren split in the 1840s they've split multiple times since then, but they split into the exclusive, the separatist, like the group Crowley's family belonged to, and the open. So the separatists like, yeah, we don't talk to you guys because you guys are savages. You guys are a kafir. So you had the Plymouth Brethren that were exclusive. Sorry, we don't associate with you because you're not one of us. You're a kafir. And with Crowley, you're a savage. We don't talk to you. Thanks. And the open, the more evangelistic factions who would talk to would associate with others. Do not take the unbeliever as your friend, as the Qur'an teaches. So these guys were kind of using that idea. Just wonder where they got that idea. Nobody knows. The exclusive brethren were isolationist, and they avoided non-members. They were led by John Nelson Darby, and the brethren developed dispensationalism, a belief in distinct historical eras culminating in Christ's return. The focus on prophetic timelines and spiritual purity contrasted with Crowley's later Thelemic concept of eons, or historical spiritual eras. So yeah, he walked away from these guys, but took a couple of their ideas. Now, it should be noted that many of the ideas that the brethren had came out of the Reformation, and many of the Reformation's ideas came from the centuries prior. So you go to the 12th, 13th, 14th centuries, and many of their ideas came from there. And then once you look at where those ideas came from, right, some of them from the Italians and so on, but when you look at where those ideas came from, those ideas came out of Islam. We'll talk about that in the future. So the brethren enforced strict moral codes, including modest dress, like women's headscarves, cover yourselves. And they limited technology, no TVs. This repressive environment likely intensified Crowley's rejection of Christian slave virtues. They were a conservative evangelical movement, and his father, Edward Crowley, was a fervent member. And the rigid religious environment created a deep-seated aversion to Christianity, which later influenced his fascination with alternative spiritualities, including Islam. He rebelled against the values of Victorian society, particularly its Christian underpinnings. The Brethren's emphasis on sin, atonement, and strict moral codes clashed with Crowley's later embrace of Islam's perceived virility. It's powerful, it's strong, it's not meek and mild, and its freedom as opposed to Christianity's slave virtues. And the Brethren's insularity and focus on biblical literalism pushed Crowley towards the more experiential, subjective, and mystical aspects of Islam. Actually, it's one thing to get the standard narrative, but in truth, if you look at much of what was going on within these evangelical groups, a lot of it's very subjective. It's all Gnostic. None of it's concrete. So he obviously got interested in Sufism, which he encountered in Egypt and Morocco, just like Christian Rosenkreuz. Interesting. And the Sufis, they emphasize personal mystical experience over temporal power, and can in this way be considered the Islamic Gnostics. And that's the Invisible Basilica, Muhammad OTO USA website. So that's in the article. So yeah, they speak of these Sufis as the Islamic Gnostics. Of course, if you read The Reliance of the Traveler, the Sufis are literally described as Islamic Gnostics. So it's quite literally what they are. Okay, let me see if I missed anything. Yeah, a lot of these guys were taking methamphetamine. I mean, even ISIS was using something like that. So now Crowley's most famous quote. Aleister Crowley, British occultist, was raised in the movement until his father's death. His most famous saying is, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will." So do what you want. That's the whole of the law. But love is the law. Love under will. So what does that mean? Because, yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense, really. So this is one of his most famous and frequently cited phrases. And this captures the philosophy of Thelema, which puts emphasis on individual freedom and the pursuit of your true purpose or will. So you have to align your actions and your desires with your true will, while emphasizing the importance of love as the guiding principle. And it sounds great. It sounds great. It's actually quite evil. So let us read from the Crowley letters and so on, from Crowley's. Let's learn what we're taught about how this works. Love under will is the love of the jungle, right? You can go to this website here, hermetic.com, and you can learn about, and also the library of the OTO, and they'll tell you on the surface, there's little distinction between the new law and the canon of anarchy. So yes, according to them, it is anarchy. So love under will, do what thou wilt is the whole of the law, but love is the law. And Yeah, whatever. The new law and the canon of anarchy. So there's no difference between, so this is love. Love is anarchy. And you ask, how is the law to be fulfilled in the case of two boys who want to eat the same orange? But since only one boy at most can eat the orange, it is evident that one of them is mistaken in supposing that it is essential to his will to eat it. So if you want to get the girl and he wants to get the girl, one of you is mistaken. The question is to be decided in the good old way, by fighting for it. So so don't forget, love is the law, love under will. So if you want the thing, beat the other guy up, kick the shit out of him. That's love under will. You see, do what thou wilt is the whole of the law. Love is the law. You see, love is the law, love under will. So if you want something and someone else wants it, kick the crap out of them. Assault them, hurt them, because that's love. See, love is beating the living daylights out of people. Because yeah, that's do what thou wilt. It sounds great. The fighting should be done chivalrously. Oh yeah, just be nice about it. Maybe you shouldn't stab him too often, or don't hit him with a brick. Just knuckle dusters. I don't know. With respect to the courage of the vanquished, as brothers, you fight. In other words, there's only this difference from our present state of society, that manners are improved. Kick the crap out of him to improve his manners, because show him you've got better manners by not making him bleed too much. There are many persons who are naturally slaves. Let him know he's a slave because you beat the shit out of him. Who have no stomach to fight. If he's too scared, then well, too bad. He's not going to eat today because we've got the weapons and you don't, and you're not going to eat because you're a slave. And we've got the power and we're willing to fight. So yeah, it sounds pretty Christian. And these people tamely yield all to anyone strong enough to take it. Yeah, so basically, if you can take it, then take it. And if they don't like it, hurt them. These persons cannot accept the law. This is also understood and provided for in the book of the law. You see, these people who don't have the will to take something, they become the slaves, and the slaves shall serve. I'd say, man, is this in the Gospels? Someone help me out here, but I'm missing the whole love is the law, love under will. And Freud was a very sick bastard, yeah. In the US, Okay, so it's an inversion of St. Augustine's love God and do as you please. It subjects love to will instead of subjecting your will to love of God. Yeah, that's how I love, right? So yeah. I want to steal from you. Can your will under love accept? Yeah, I'm going to take your stuff. And if you are not willing to fight for it, then you become my slave and you can serve me. So, Hussein, where are you? Hello. Hussein Mashni in the house. Hello. Where is he? Harbinger. Oh, wow. Thank you. Hi. Harbinger. Oh, my gosh, man. You know what? Didn't I reach out to you because Led Zeppelin liked Islam and Crowley? Yeah, that's terrible. Man, you should really come on the channel again. It would be great. Maybe you with Usama. Because I spoke to Usama several times. We should get together because when Skype, when Skype finished, when Skype was, when it was canceled, the service was canceled, everything moved to Teams and it's not the same. But man, I'd love to have you back on, because, there was one day we were having a discussion and I really wanted Usama to reach out to you. I think he might have tried to, but we couldn't get a hold of you to get you on to come and talk about some issues. Okay, so definitions are more important than the words. Definitions are more important than the words, yes. So now this is what he believed, but it is possible for any apparent slave to prove his mastery by fighting his oppressors, even as now. But he has this additional chance in our system that his conduct will be watched with kindly eye by our authorities and his prowess rewarded by admission to the ranks of the master class. Law of the jungle, if you want something, fight for it. Beat up the other guy. And if you do a great job and you fight your way up the ranks, you too will become one of the masters. Yeah. So look, I think I'll pause here. I think I've explained. Love you guys. It hits different now. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I love you guys is like, I'm going to beat the living daylights out of you and take all your stuff and make you slaves who serve me. Yeah. So, guys, yeah, I think this should explain a lot of where Crowley comes from. This is part one. There should be 2 or 3 parts in this to go through his fascination with Islam, how he got involved with Islam, and how he created his religion and the parallels. It's basically a copy of Islam in many ways, combined with a lot of the Gnostic stuff. He makes what is Gnostic, that is implicit in Islam, he makes explicit. Nothing to do with Islam. No, exactly. Aloha snack bar. Exactly. This, you'd be amazed how much this stuff has to do with Islam. It's incredibly linked to Islam. Even like with the Nazis and World War II and so on, and how they became the Nazi party, all of it's linked to Islam and Sufism. And old style mom's love. Yeah, like with a slipper, you know, but my mom wasn't that aggressive. So yeah, thank you. Hussein, reach out on Teams if you can find me. Otherwise, send me an email or reach me through Usama, but love to have you on again, man. Really would love to have you on, and come join us for some of these discussions we have with Usama. It will be really, really great to have you on. The Triggered Christian says, no, you do not love me. You haven't beaten me up. So yeah, I guess that if she did beat you up, that would be true love. And then you get to serve as a slave. Okay, fine. Yeah. So guys, I'll call it a night here. Hopefully you've learned something useful. But clearly I think you can see there is something very wrong with this man. There are some serious problems here. And yeah, all of these are references taken from books that I think are fairly authoritative, authors that have done the research. And some of the, like the Dave McGowan stuff, one might question some of his conclusions. But all of the rest are quotes taken from the OTO, taken from Crowley. And I mean, clearly the guy was debauched. And he was inspired by some very debauched people who were clearly corrupting Christianity and thumbing their nose at God. Yeah, so we'll leave it at that. So guys, tomorrow, tomorrow my Kung Fu is ready. Right. That was funny. That's really good. So guys, tomorrow I will talk about the UK, how the UK became a socialist or communist state, and how it's run by a group called the Fabian Society. So that is, yeah, that's actually quite disturbing. And the Fabian Society wants you dead. Now give me a black eye. If you love me, you'll give me a black eye. Yeah, so guys, thank you very much. So good night. And we shall see you all tomorrow. And yeah, please do share this. Do like, share, subscribe. Tell your friends about it. Yeah, okay. Let's call it a night. Let's call it. Let's all be nice. Let's all be nice. Let's not be like Crowley. Crowley was a bad man. Let's not be like the bad man. So good night, guys. God bless, and I'll see you all tomorrow evening sometime with the Fabian Society in the UK, because things are not well in the UK. Things are definitely not well, and we're going to discuss why. Good night.